I went the old way. I heard what you said. I went through the novice and all of that. And then I got my extra. I worked up doing the 20 words per minute, but then I just
okay.
Let it go.
Well, you know, a lot of this assumes like no knowledge of Morse code. People who want to find a way to learn the Morse code, but I think we have some people remotely connected in, and we have some people here. I can tell you that whether you have zero prior knowledge of Morse code or you're a 50 word per minute operator, CW Academy has a place for you, okay? And we'll talk about that as we go. Picasso had a saying that good artists borrow and great artists steal, okay? I stole this presentation from Joe AATA. He originally put this together. I made some changes. The title is Introducing CW Academy, a solution for perpetuating the CW mode. CWops promoted this as a way to increase activity on the air, Morse activity on the air. And it's a really great program. And of course, like I say, I stole this from Joe. So, all right, I get asked all the time, are people still doing CW? And the answer is, yeah, lots of hams are doing CW. It may not be commercially viable anymore, but people do it for fun. The interest comes from all over. There's QRP interest in CW because CW signals take up less bandwidth, so they propagate further. There's lots of home brewing interest in CW. It just comes from everywhere. Get out of this. All right. The last pre-COVID field day numbers show that CW is still a very popular operating mode, okay? By the way, where does the interest come from? Lots of contesters like CW, okay? Don't quote me on this, nobody out there is seeing this, even though it's on Zoom. My problem with contesters is that they don't get on the air enough between contests, okay? I enjoy contesting, so I consider myself in that category, but I tell people I like to operate, okay? The saying I have is I would operate a toaster if I could make contacts on it. And so CW is one of those modes, but I like contesting, I like DXing, I like rag chewing, I love mentoring. So, all right, about CW Academy. So it was created by CWops, which is this club of CW enthusiasts. At any given time, there's over 80 advisors that are leading classes. Some of these guys are really dedicated. Some do 2, 3, 4 classes at the same time with different groups. There's 4 levels of training. This presentation will talk about those. There are 3 what they call semesters a year. Each semester is 8 weeks in length. The classes meet twice weekly. And so that's pretty much it. There have been more than 6,000 students who have completed the beginner's course, which is the very first level, since 2015. Class days vary time by the instructor who's leading the class. I personally meet with my students and say, what time do you want to meet? My schedule is booked solid, and so one day is as bad as the next, and with different time management skills, you figure out a way to move things around and make it happen. Typically 4 to 5 students per class. I've had as many as 8 in my class, and I've had a couple of classes with as few as 1 individual in the class. Why does this happen? The reason it happens is because you'll start a class and students will say, I just can't do it now. I signed up, but my schedule has changed, okay? Sometimes what happens is at the last minute, you get people who want to jump into a class and they try to accommodate them. So occasionally you'll get more than 5 students in a class. I typically teach youth. I've had a number of classes where the young person said, hey, I've got a couple of siblings that want to take the class. My father would like to take the class with me. I'm happy to have them all join in. Best thing about this, it's free, okay? The advisors do this purely on a volunteer basis, okay? For the students, there's a certain commitment they have to make for the class anyway. They have to go out and get themselves paddles. They have to get themselves some kind of gear, and we'll talk about those. So there is a commitment that they have to make, but nevertheless, we do not charge for the classes. All right, so what's the method? How do we do the teaching? An advisor leads the class. We don't call them teachers because of the fact that the class sessions are more review sessions than anything else. And I'll explain that on the next slide. We send using Farnsworth. Everyone understand what Farnsworth means? So for the people remotely, I'll go real quick. Morse code has a certain timing. You have a dot or a dit. That's one period of time. A dot is 3 times the length of the dit. So if this is a dit, this is a dot. Excuse me. Quick question on the Zoom.
Yeah.
Is are there sound filters on?
Maybe.
So they may not be hearing me when I send Morse code. Okay.
I should disable those.
All right. So if you're not hearing this remotely, I apologize. The timing is between the dits and the das, the lengths of the dits and the das, the timing between words, the timing is all preset, okay? With Farnsworth, you send the letter at a faster speed and you increase the amount of time between the letters. So this does 2 things for the student. It allows, actually more than 2, it allows them to recognize the sound of the letter at a higher speed. So the letter C at 20 words per minute sounds like this. At 5 words per minute, it sounds like this. Okay? So it allows them to hear the letter at a faster speed. So presumably when they get their speed up, they don't have to go through another learning curve, relearning the sound of the letter. It also gives them more time to recognize the characters between them being said, okay? And so we focus on something called instant character recognition, okay? Which is kind of a buzzword. I'm not sure there is instant character recognition because even if you're copying Morse code at 50 words per minute, it takes a split second to recognize that character, but nevertheless, we focus on recognizing the characters faster and faster and faster. That's part of learning the Morse code. We emphasize sending as well as receiving characters. The reason for this is once you've learned the letters and the numbers, you better be getting on the air. So you should know how to send by the time you've learned all of the characters. And we typically group new letters that we're learning based on the order, based on how they're used in the English language. By the way, Morse code is also designed this way. So for instance, the letters like E, I, A, N, very short letters in Morse code are the ones we teach first, and the least used letters in the English language like, X, Q, and Z are the very last letters that we learn. So that's pretty much the teaching method. What do you need to participate? High-speed broadband internet. We do these over Zoom, okay? If you don't have internet, I don't know how you'll take the class. Obviously, with the internet, you need some kind of device for computing. You also need a camera and microphone. You'll need a set of paddles. So in our teaching method, we teach using paddles, not a traditional hand key. Okay, we'll talk about that. You need a keyer with a side tone. or you need a radio with a built-in keyer and side tone. So I've actually brought the keyer that I use for my class. Understand, paddles are a mechanical switch. It's the keyer that makes the sound that you hear, okay? And of course, with paddles and a keyer, one side makes dits, the other side makes das. When you switch back and forth, for instance, the letter C, sorry, right? You go back and forth, but the timing of what's sent is all done inside the keyer. So the code is almost perfect. So there's a couple of reasons we use keyers and paddles rather than the hand keys. I mentioned earlier that you get used to the sound of the letter. When you send the letter at a higher speed, you tend to focus on the sound of the character rather than counting the dots and dashes. Anything other than hearing the character takes time. You have to do a translation. So if I do really slow, I do this. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's an H. Well, if somebody sends this, you don't have time to count the dots, okay? You might as well learn it at the higher speed and use it at the higher speed, okay? Trying to send this correctly with a hand key is really, really hard for a number of reasons. Getting the timing correct is hard. Sending those dots really quickly is hard. Operators back in the railroad used to develop what they called glass fist, okay? How you send Morse code in the old days was, they said it was the sound of your fist. Well, glass fist was carpal tunnel syndrome before they called it carpal tunnel syndrome. And a lot of Morse operators developed these handicaps because they were using hand keys. You always see the hand key in the movie. They weren't used commercially for like over the last 100 years. They went to what was called a side swiper. They would go side to side, or they used an old mechanical bug, which was side to side, because you don't develop carpal tunnel syndrome that way. So we focus on learning on with a keyer and paddles. I tell people say, well, I have a hand key and I'd love to use it. And my response is, if you were learning how to drive, you want to learn how to drive on a modern car that's easy to drive. If you later on want to go and drive a 29 Dodge with a column shift where you have to double clutch, I think that's great, okay? I have several hand keys. I belong to, what's the club?
Straight Key Century Club.
I belong to Straight Key Century Club. I have a number. I make contacts on the air. I love it, okay? But for teaching, to get the proper sound, the proper spacing, we recommend keyer and paddles. The secret to learning Morse code is you have to practice a little bit every day. The slide says 60 minutes of practice every day, really half hour to 45 minutes for beginners, okay? A little bit of practice every day is the secret to learning Morse code, and there's no way around that. The people I've spoken to that said to me, Bruce, I've been trying for 30 years to learn Morse code. Why is your method successful and other methods not? And my response is because with the really structured learning environment, you're almost forced to practice a little bit every day, and that basically gets you over the hump. Whereas if you're doing this once a week, once every couple of weeks, twice a week, it's not enough time to remember from one session to the next. You really have to practice a little every day. I'm not sure, I know for my students, when I teach my classes, I've had students on Macs, I've had students running like Unix, Linux-based computers. I don't think this is really that important. There are some great DOS tools out there for helping with learning Morse code, okay? But I don't think that's a requirement for CW Academy, even though Joe wrote the presentation, so I left it in the presentation. Okay, so what if I want to use a straight key? This, by the way, was one of the original slides, but I found this somewhere, and I don't know if this key actually exists, but for anybody who's like me, felt around on the foundation of the basement and found a mousetrap that had been left there years earlier, it can be a painful experience. So again, the current way of thinking is work with keyers and a paddle. By the way, CW Academy has been around now for, I think, about 10 or 12 years. It was originally all done using hand keys. The early advisors who went to paddles were ostracized at the time, okay? And actually threatened with maybe you shouldn't be part of the program. Over time, they won over the rest of the advisors. This is something that is not just a theory. It's really been proven out over time that keyers and paddles are a better way for learning Morse code. All right, so people want to know, what are the 4 levels? There's a beginner's level, limited or no prior experience with Morse code. I have had students come to my first session, everyone introduce themselves, I'll say, what prior experience do you have with no Morse code? Most of them say none, a little. I've had students that say to me, well, I kind of know a few of the letters and numbers. Well, how much do you know? Well, I've made a couple of contacts. Oh, interesting. So let's do a little test at the end of the session. And I'll tell them, you already know the letters and the numbers. You're wasting your time in the beginner's level. You should go up to the 2nd level. Well, I really want to take your class. Yeah, but if you want to save time and you want to get better at this, you're not going to get significantly better because you're already where the graduates of the beginner's class are. You really want to be up at the next level. So when they say limited or no prior experience with Morse code, this is really what this class is designed for. If you go to the CWops website, there is a section that has tools for each class level. And there is a lesson guide that you download, which really walks you through the program. It's really detailed. And I'm sure there are people out there that use the written tools for CW Academy and do it on their own, because the lesson guide is really that detailed. Now, you don't get the benefit of working with an advisor who can identify and help you with things that come along the way. You don't get the peer group that you're working with, practice with, and meet with, but nevertheless, what's online really details the entire program. Instructions for Morse Code Trainer is also in this document. Morse Code Trainer is an online site which will send you practice of the letters that you're learning in each particular session, okay? So it goes hand in hand with the lesson guide. And when we meet as a class, we review the new letters that have been introduced, okay, and the new items that have been introduced for that week. So I really don't teach the students. I more advise them and review with them what's in the lesson guide. All of the students learn the letters and the numbers by session 10. So there's 16 sessions. It's eight weeks, 16 sessions, but you've learned all the letters and numbers after the 10th session, okay? And it's time for students, once they've got the letters memorized, regardless of the speed, it's time to kick them out of the nest and get them on the air, okay? You're not going to learn any faster, okay, by any other means. So you remember I said that half hour to 45 minutes a day? If you're making contacts, 1 or 2 contacts a day, that total time, half hour to 45 minutes, That's more exciting, more interesting, and better than any practice that you could do any other way, okay? But people also have the question, well, if they're on the air after session 10, what do you do for the last 6 sessions? You've got 3 weeks there. And the answer is, we teach the students how to become operators, okay? You know, and again, I tell my students, you know, passing a test, a ham radio test and getting a license doesn't make you a radio operator. Learning the Morse code doesn't make you a Morse operator, okay? So in the last 4 sessions, we do things like how to call CQ, how to answer CQ, how does that first contact go? What kind of information is important that you exchange? How do you make a contact in a contest, okay? What happens if you hear a pileup, you know, a DX pileup? What does that mean? What should you listen for? So we talk about all of these on-the-air situations that you'll come across. What's expected to succeed? 2 online sessions per week, a little bit of practice every day. If you do that, you'll get through this. We all live busy lives. I tell my students, this is not like work, okay, where you have to show up every day. If on a Wednesday night you have a family obligation, a work obligation, and you decide to skip a class, okay, you have the lesson guide. Just start practicing as if you're going to show up for the next lesson, okay? I've got a student right now who's 15 years old. We just went through session 10 where all the letters and numbers, he's probably missed half the classes, okay? He's an honor student in school. He works where occasionally Sunday night or a Wednesday night, he gets called for work. He can't be at the class. We met last night. He's right exactly where he should be. He stayed right up with the material. He's doing great. So things happen, but if you want to succeed, attend the online sessions, practice a little bit every day. Practice is more important than anything else. The end goal, you'll learn the Morse code, right? Okay. But when we say learn the Morse code, you have a basic memory retention of all the letters and the numbers. You're not necessarily at high speed or a seasoned operator. You've just remembered what's there, okay? We focus on something called head copy. What this means is you write a minimal amount down. You write down what's important. Call sign, name, the QTH, the location where the person lives, but not a lot more. If you start rag chewing and talking about the weather and the Red Sox and, you know, family problems with the wife, whatever it is, okay, you don't have to write that stuff down. You're just listening to it as if we're engaged in a conversation. Learn some protocols of what a basic contact looks like. Use these skills to get on the air. And basically, learn the Morse code to a minimum speed, okay? Not anything fancy, not anything fast, but it gives you the ability to get on the air and use the Morse code. The second level is the fundamental level. Remember, there's 4 levels to CW Academy. And I tell people, the slide's got all this fancy stuff in it. It's really more of the same, except instead of teaching you the letters and the numbers, the focus now is on building speed, okay, and building additional skills. And so a lot of this from now on is redundant. It's the same thing, just faster and faster and faster. And different things tend to happen as your speed increases. So we still talking about head copy and instant character recognition. You remember those buzzwords, right? Okay. And increasing your skills for on-the-air conventional contacts. But at the fundamental level, they do a little bit more focus on contesting and what that means, they push on the air contacts as opposed to just practice in the Zoom sessions, right? And the goal here is to get students up from 6 words per minute, maybe up 10 words per minute or higher. Okay? Again, same. The intermediate level is the next level up. Now, I have to tell you that I have had students that have gone from the beginner's level, the very first level, and went straight to the intermediate level. They completely skipped the fundamental level. That after the first 8-week session at the beginner's level, they were fast enough to just move straight up to the intermediate level, right? And the intermediate level is, 10 words per minute, an increased proficiency contest, DX, rag choose, whatever. And again, more of the same, increase, 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 right? One of the things that changes is at some point in your CW journey, you'll start recognizing words as sounds. And people have a hard time with this. Bruce, what does that mean? And I say, well, your brain is interesting when it comes to learning. If you work with your children or your grandchildren in learning how to read, the first thing they do is they learn the ABC song, right? Okay? And of course, when they ask you, tell me what you think of me, you tell your grandchildren how wonderful they are that they've learned the song, right? Okay? And then the teachers have very simple books for them, and they have a book with big letters, and they teach them the sound of the letter. So C is K, A is A, T is Ta. And they look at the book, and they see the letter, and they sound it out. K, A, T. Okay? Oh, that's cat. Somewhere in their reading journey, the words start popping off the page of them. Okay? Now, you're teaching the brain to visually recognize the spoken word. Okay? Through vision. Morse code, you're teaching the brain to recognize the spoken word, but through the sound. Okay? Different sense, same process, and at some point, you start hearing words as sounds. I tell people the 27th letter in the alphabet is, oh, too fast. Everybody know what that is? CQ, right? Okay? But if you're tuning across the band, you hear Morse code being sent, but if you hear, it's like a magnet, okay? It grabs you, okay? I will say arguably the 28th letter of the alphabet is 73. You use it all the time, it's common, and it pops out at you. And so you at some point will start recognizing words as sounds, okay? And again, the intermediate level, they want to try to get you 20 words per minute, 18 words per minute, the higher teen speeds, right? Okay? And then more of the same, advanced level. So increase, 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 okay? They say recognize phrases as sounds, okay? I don't know, I'm not exactly sure how to translate that, but okay. Learn to copy from behind. This is an interesting thing. Typists tell me that they will read like something that's handwritten and they have to type it, and they'll read fast typists 2 or 3 lines ahead of where they're typing. That somehow it goes into their brains and comes out their fingers later, okay? I've never really mastered learning to copy from behind, but when I was younger, it seemed like a real thing. Now that I'm older, it doesn't. I don't know if my brain has just gotten hardened or what, but learning to copy from behind. And by the way, the advisors have drills and have games and have all kinds of things to help the students practice this. But it's really to get you up past 20 words per minute up into the mid-20s. CWops as an organization wants their members to be able to use Morse code in a 25 word per minute range, and many graduates of the advanced level, if they get on the air and use the Morse code, will get invited to join CW Academy. All right, there is a youth program. This is me pre-COVID. I tell people COVID turned me white, but it didn't. But you know, they'll tell people that and they'll say, "You had COVID?" No, well, no, that's not why it happened. But anyway, back in 2016 or so, I went to Dayton, and at the time, there was a 3-year waiting period to get into CW Academy. Okay. And I had a word with Rob K6RB, who was running CW Academy, and I said, look, we have a problem. And he was like, well, we've got this great program, and it's really popular, and what could the problem possibly be? And I said to him, look, you know, it's really hard to tell a 15-year-old sophomore in high school that they're going to have to be an 18-year-old freshman in college before they get the privilege of taking our class. And he nodded and he looked at me and he said, so what are you going to do about it? Okay. And so we came up with this youth program where at the time the kids fast tracked. Okay. So I was the dedicated advisor. The young people came into my class and got ahead of the waiting list. Got ahead of the waiting list. And the goal here is to get the kids on the air and using CW. Kids like being in their own classes. Okay, I can tell you stories. I can tell you stories of kids who were not particularly motivated CW students until the day we talked about contesting. And it's like, well, what's a contest? I say, well, it's like a video game, except you do it on the radio using Morse code. Oh, that's interesting. How does it work? So you show the kids, and all of a sudden, two 12-year-old kids are doing everything they can to, you know, figuratively beat each other to a pulp. Okay, and so the competitive nature of kids is really pretty amazing. So anyway, getting young people in CW is really fun. I've had some great on-the-air experiences. You know, I'll sign off with somebody on a rag chew, and I'll get a call from one of the kids, okay, who'll say, you know, how's it going, and, you know, blah, 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 and then, okay, 7-3, and another one of my kids calls me immediately after, okay, and again, I'm glad I came, ran across you on the air, and here's what I'm doing, and blah, blah, blah. In CWops, the youngest members of CWops, going back now 4 or 5 years, have been former students of mine, 10 years old, 12 years old. Really good CW operators. So it's fun. I love doing this. And it is really enjoying. It is really enjoyable activity. At the beginning of this, I mentioned, and it may have been before we started the Zoom session, but I mentioned there's a place for anyone in CW Academy, including if you're a 30, 40, 50 word per minute CW operator. CW Academy always needs advisors, okay? Always could use more advisors. And so you don't even have to be a member of the CWops club to be an advisor. All you need to do is have a knowledge of Morse code and want to share it. By the way, I usually do this at the beginning of the presentation. Everybody know why CW and Morse code is synonymous? So I don't see any heads shaking. So back in the dark ages of amateur radio, the technology was called spark gap technology, where you generated an electromagnetic signal, okay, essentially using a spark, okay, to generate an oscillation, okay? And think of this A spark gap is what's called a dampened wave, okay? So if I had two devices in front of me with keyboards, one was a piano, one is an electric organ. If I hit the key on the piano and hold it down, the string vibrates, but because of resistance in the air, eventually stops. And that's a dampened wave, okay? Just like hitting a bell is a damping wave, hitting a tuning fork is a dampened wave, okay? And with spark gap, you would generate the ringing in the circuit with the spark, okay? They didn't know any better, okay? Vacuum tubes hadn't been invented yet, okay? But Edwin Armstrong took the, what was his name? I can't remember now, but took the vacuum tube and figured out how to use it as a receiver, how to build oscillators, okay? An electric organ, when you hit the key, the sound goes forever. And that's because it has an oscillator in it, okay? Just like you have oscillators in radios. And so during the technology transition around 1920, everybody was using Morse code. It was before phone was popular, and so people would say, are you using Spark or are you using CW? And CW became synonymous with Morse code. Anyway, so we're always looking for more advisors, and being a member of CWops is not a requirement. I got to tell you, this is a tremendously satisfying experience, okay? Being an advisor, meeting those students on the air, seeing them in contests, having former students. I look at the advisors list, okay? I mentioned those 80 or so advisors. Looking down the list and seeing my former students who are teaching other people Morse code. This, for me, in like Morse code terms, this is like having grandchildren, right? My children are now going on, and so it really is a satisfying experience. All right. If you want to sign up for CW Academy, you go to the CWops website. You can find the links. It's pretty easy. If you do a search on CW Academy, Google, it'll take you here. There is a page on the student resources where if you have a knowledge of Morse code, you take, they'll send you a file at a speed, and they'll ask you, did I copy all of it? Did I copy none of it or a little bit? Did I get some of it? And it'll make a recommendation on what class level you should go into. So if you already know some Morse code, you can kind of figure that out, okay? Questions?
Is there still a 3-year waiting list?
There is not. It's now, you can generally get into the class, okay? I can assure you, so we're now, depending on who the advisor is, most of the way through the current semester. I think the next one starts in January. So if you sign up now, you're definitely going to be starting in January. I don't know if there are any questions from the field, but I have this, when I have large crowds, there's no problem with questions. But what I will tend to do is I'll write my own questions just to keep a little bit of activity going. Anybody, what's the secret to learning Morse code?
Practice.
Doesn't matter what method you use to learn the Morse code, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, but practice, okay? You got to practice a little bit every day. Time and consistency. It's the secret. The people who come and say that I have a mental block, I'm dyslexic, I'm, by the way, very dyslexic, okay? If you practice a little bit every day, it's more discipline than anything else. I hear constantly that there's a connection between people who are musically talented and people who know Morse code. And I can tell you for a fact, I couldn't carry on, I couldn't sing a tune if my life depended on it, okay? I've had somebody else say to me, Bruce, they're looking at it the wrong way. If you have the discipline, time and consistency to practice a musical instrument and learn how to play the musical instrument, then learning Morse code is a piece of cake. It's about discipline. It's not about having musical ability. I can't vouch for either of those, okay, because I don't know if they're right or wrong, but I find that makes a certain amount of sense, right? Is there a best way to learn Morse code? I would love to tell you that CW Academy is the very, best way to learn Morse code, far better than all the rest, okay? What I'll tell you is that CW Academy is a good common denominator, okay? It pushes some discipline, you have a peer group, you have a relationship with an advisor that you can ask questions to, okay? The truth is, the best method to learn Morse code is the one that works for you, okay? That's the truth, okay? And I like to think that this is a pretty good program, and I've taught Morse code over the years before this. I think they have really got some good things going, but it's the way that works for you. There was a question.
So do people typically take all 4 classes?
No. It's all over the place. I've had students who have taken the class, much like they get an amateur radio license and never get on the air with it, okay? It's almost like they're taking an adult education class in basket weaving. Even though they pass the class and they do well, they don't have they have an interest somehow in focusing on something that they devote some time to, but they never go anywhere with it. I've had other students, they use it, they get on the air at 5 words per minute. They do it the way I did it as a kid. They build their code speed and their tools by just using it on the air. They may not have an interest in high-speed Morse code. They may not have an interest in contesting and doing these kinds of things. It just all depends. But I've had students also go like shotgun, okay? One class to the next, to the next, to the next, 4 semesters and they're at 25 words per minute, or I have students who are far more talented in Morse code than I am, and I've been doing this now 55 years, and after 2 years, this young person will just completely blow the socks off me, okay? So I get tremendous delight in that. I think it's great. So just depends what you want to do. The other thing is that when you say go through all 4 programs, I know people that had fairly substantial Morse code skills who just decided they needed to take the advanced level. They wanted to get better at it, and so they started off at the top and focused on their skills there. Are there bad ways to learn Morse code? We don't have all day, but there are many bad ways to learn Morse code. Anything that doesn't associate the sound with the letter is a bad way. Counting bits and dots. I learned Morse code at 5 words per minute. The groups were E-I-S-H. So E, I, S, S, H. That was the first group. Well, guess what? I learned to count dots, okay? And unlearning that was painful. There are bad ways. There's one I see online. It looks like a flow chart. And the guy says, you learn Morse code this way. If it's a dit, it's one side of the flow chart. If it's a dot, it's the other side of the flow chart. If you're a computer that can do 50,000 instruction cycles per second, okay, maybe you can learn how to copy Morse code that way. But the human brain, by the time you're through the flow chart, at 5 words per minute, they've sent 10 more characters that you're never going to copy, that are gone. So my point is, and you should be focusing on the sound. There are many bad ways. What other programs are out there? There are lots of programs. CWops members. And this program had been around a number of years before they started Long Island CW Club. They have lots of different classes during the week. They're all online with a published schedule, and as a student, you can jump into any one of these classes that you want, okay? It's not semester-based, it's ongoing, so that if there's no class with CW Academy currently being taught, there is a Long Island CW class going on. So they're a little bit different. If you're self-motivated and you can get to the class twice a week and do the work, then Long Island CW may be the one for you. But you don't have fellow classmates and an advisor and that kind of thing. You're just kind of showing up. I've had students who said to me, Bruce, at the end of CW Academy, I joined Long Island CW Club so I would have a way of practicing. And my response to them is I'll look them right in the eye and say, why aren't you just on the air? If you're going to practice, why aren't you just on calling CQ? Okay? And there's lots of excuses for that. Long Island CW Club costs you money. There's an annual membership or a lifetime membership. It's not a lot, okay? I have not heard any complaining about the cost or that kind of thing, but there is a cost to it. There's a program called LCWO, Learn CW Online. They use a slightly different method. It's called the Koch method, which is another good method. It focuses on the sound, okay? What you don't have are peers, and you don't have anybody to ask questions to, right? Okay? But all of these programs are good programs, and there are people who are active on the air who are using these. There are also software tools that are out there to help you build speed, okay? Morse is a popular one. Another is called RUFZ or RefC. Basically, they're all alike. They drill you on Morse code. I can tell you, even as an experienced operator, I used to do a lot of travel for work. I'd be taking a red eye back from California, and I'd get a tap on the shoulder, and the guy said, well, what the heck are you doing? And I'd unplug the earbuds and say, I'm doing my Morse code practice. And they're like, people still do that? And yeah, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so there are programs out there. CWops has a really good page called CW Resources, okay, where you can find out more information on all of this stuff. So, that's the end of the presentation, but I'm going to go back to one slide. Okay, this one. My email is all over the web. Feel free, and by the way, I have a couple different email addresses. I use this one. I want to find out who's farming the email addresses off of QRZ.com, right? Okay. If you do a search for K1BG, you'll find me, you'll find my phone number. My mobile number is open to the world. And if you have questions on this, feel free to ask. I think this presentation will be posted, right? But if you want a copy of the presentation, send me an email. I'm happy to send you a PDF version of this. And you can look at all the links and look through it and do all that kind of thing. Any further questions?
If someone in our club asked you to come and give this presentation in Bedford, New Hampshire.
When? Okay, when? I'd be happy to. I've spoken to Granite State, you said?
Bill Arkin.
I've spoken there before. It was pre-COVID the last time I spoke there, and I did not speak on CW Academy. Okay, so I'd be happy to come up and do this in person.
I'll mention it to him.
Great.
So tell us a little more about the Kier. It looks battery operated.
So this is a 1970 vintage Kier by a company that was Ham Radio. I can't remember the name of the company, but it was popular in the 70s. I know, I think I have to relinquish. I don't see the next speaker yet, so I guess I still have a little bit of time. So if you look at the history of radios, everything was hand keys. And so when keyers started becoming popular, it was done as an add-on. So you plug your paddles into the keyer, and then there's a port that keys your transmitter, okay? And so originally you needed a keyer if you wanted to use it on the air kind of thing. As semiconductors became more popular, they started putting the keying function in the transceiver. So there was this period of time of maybe about 10 years when keyers became popular. And this was one of the companies. MFJ has had tons of different keyers. Every time there's a change in technology, they come out with a new family of keyers, right? So the original ones were all discrete components. They would make, flip-flops out of NAND gates and all that kind of thing, right? And as the technology gets better and better, they come out with different revisions of keyers. But
it doesn't look like it's connected to the computer. Sending out, like, is the speaker in there?
So there's a speaker here. So what you're hearing is coming right out of this. So,
and it is battery on it.
And there are batteries in it, correct. And so when I do the Zoom session, much like we're doing the Zoom session today, I need a loud side tone so that the students can hear it.
The other thing I was curious about is there a way to practice CW?
So the answer is these days, you really need somebody else who wants to practice with you, okay? There was a time you would hear some CW on 2 meters or 6 meters, but not in a while, okay? And it used to be, even till a couple of years ago, CW during contests was hugely popular. And that's kind of all moved to FT8 now, okay, because of the weak signal capabilities of FT8. But if the bands are open, you still hear a lot of activity on CW.
One of the fellows in my club that I practice with, we do it on 2 meters because we're not bothering anybody there, really.
Yeah. Do that, where you have a speaker making sound and send, FM rather than actually use the key.
Yes, yeah, it plugs right into my radio.
So like the clubs that will do like 2 meter practice sessions or classes over 2 meters, they actually do it like this.
Yeah.
And most of my students use the side tone in their transceiver. So instead of them using a keyer, they use a transceiver and they shut the RF off. What's interesting is that one of my current students, there was no means, if you buy like a Yaesu or an ICOM transceiver, there's a practice mode, so it's not transmitting, right? He bought one of these little Chinese transceivers with no way of shutting it off. It was sending RF. He says, I can't use this. I said to him, I said, tune the dial, okay, below 7.000, out of the amateur band, okay? Stop transmitting RF, but the keyer still works. So, all right, I think I'm time-wise, we're ready, next one? Great. Thank you all very much. I appreciate your attendance, and good luck with your CW journeys.